Imagine stepping into a workplace where every thought, every concern, every idea, no matter how raw or uncomfortable, is just laid bare.
Right out in the open?
Exactly. From the CEO down to the brand new intern, everyone says exactly what they're thinking all the time. No sugarcoating, no hidden agendas, just raw, honest feedback.
It sounds kind of terrifying, actually. For a lot of people, that probably conjures images of, well, chaos, resentment building up.
Yeah, total chaos. Or office politics just spiraling completely out of control feels risky, maybe even dangerous. But then, for some people, this extreme openness isn't just like a brave experiment.
No, they see it as the secret sauce.
That's it. The secret sauce to huge success, a catalyst for innovation, the foundation of a really engaged, high-performing team.
Which is quite a claim.
It really is. So today, we're embarking on a deep dive into this provocative, often challenging idea, radical transparency. It's a philosophy most famously championed by the hedge fund manager Ray Dalio. You've probably heard of his book, Principles.
A very influential book, yeah.
Definitely. And our mission here is to really unpack why Dalio, and others too, argue that this intense, sometimes kind of brutal level of honesty is actually the key, the fundamental key to learning fast and constantly improving.
How it helps teams get past the surface stuff, you mean?
Exactly. Cut through the noise, bypass all the assumptions, and get to the objective truth faster than pretty much any other way. And, importantly, we'll dig into what it really takes to build and, sustain such a demanding culture.
Because it's definitely not easy.
Not at all. So get ready for an understanding of an idea that might just fundamentally change how you think about communication, feedback, collaboration. Really in any group, your work team, maybe a volunteer group, even just your own personal growth.
Okay.
Let's unpack this. We've pulled together some really fascinating sources. They don't just explain radical transparency, they show it in action. Or, sometimes, they show the consequences when it's missing. We should probably start right at the core of Dalio's thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense, because without getting that foundational piece, the rest doesn't really hang together.
Right.
And what's truly fascinating, I think, and maybe often overlooked, is how Dalio roots this whole idea, not just in, a communication tactic, but in a really fundamental human challenge. Our own subjectivity.
Our built-in biases, you mean?
Precisely. He argues pretty strongly that the biggest mistake most people make isn't about lack of effort or smarts, but it's to not see themselves and others objectively. And because of that, we just keep bumping into our own weaknesses and other people's weaknesses over and over again.
Like Groundhog Day, but with mistakes.
Kind of. And we never really address the root causes. It stops us reaching our potential, individually and as a group. It's a profound point because it's more than just self-awareness. It demands a conscious, almost disciplined effort to step outside our own heads.
That makes a lot of sense. We're basically wired to see the world through our own lens, aren't we?
Yeah.
Our experiences, beliefs, biases, they all filter everything. It's almost natural.
It is natural, a kind of evolutionary shortcut, maybe. But Dalio suggests that the really successful people, they have this rare ability to go above themselves to see things objectively. They actively seek out and consider other perspectives, even when those perspectives totally clash with their own.
Instead of just staying trapped in their own heads with their own biases, as he puts it.
Exactly. He's really pushing us to challenge our own internal stories, to
Yeah.
consciously break free from what we think is true and really seek out what is true, objectively true.
It's about cultivating that mindset where, okay, I have biases, but they're not facts to be defended. They're potential roadblocks to overcome.
Right. And the real insight then is that radical transparency isn't just about talking honestly. It's like a systemic antidote. It's designed to force our internal blind spots out into the open.
Like building an environment that acts as a mirror.
A really objective mirror, yeah. Reflecting back what your own mind might be hiding from you. And that's incredibly hard to do just by yourself. If you connect this to the bigger picture, true objectivity isn't something we're just born with. It's a skill.
It's a skill you have to deliberately develop and keep working on. And it takes a willingness to engage with stuff that might totally contradict your most cherished beliefs or, your comfortable assumptions.
So think about that for a second. Think about a time you were maybe stubbornly stuck in your own head on some project. Totally convinced your way was the only way, the best way.
We've all been there.
Totally. How might a culture that actively seeks out and genuinely values different, even critical viewpoints, how might that have shown you a clearer, more objective path forward? That's really the core of what Dalio is getting at, moving from I think towards what are the actual facts.
And that's a powerful question to reflect on.
It really is, because it leads right into Dalio's, well, pretty counterintuitive take on uncomfortable truths. Most of us, let's be honest, we dread hearing we're bad at something.
Oh, yeah, it stings. Feels like a personal attack, right? A hit to the ego. We flinch. We absolutely flinch. But Dalio just completely flips that script. He insists that finding out you're not good at a task or you have a weakness, it shouldn't be upsetting. He actually says it should make you happy that you found out.
Happy, that sounds difficult.
Right. But his logic is, because knowing that and dealing with it will improve your chances of getting what you want. It's not just reframing criticism, it's turning it into like a genuine gift, something valuable.
It's a huge shift in how you react, emotionally and intellectually, to feedback. Instead of getting defensive, it pushes you towards a rational, goal-focused view of your own performance, almost like an engineer looking at a machine diagnosing a problem.
How can we make this work better?
Exactly. Dalio uses this really vivid analogy in Principles. He says, imagine you're the designer manager of your own life or a project. If you discover that you, acting as the worker, can't do something well,
Yeah.
you need to essentially fire yourself as the worker and get a good replacement while you stay on as the designer manager.
Oh, okay.
It's not about beating yourself up. It's about optimizing for the goal, for the outcome you want. It's not about protecting your ego or clinging to a role you're just not suited for.
That perspective really encourages a growth mindset, doesn't it? Not just for one person, but for the whole system. It's about constant improvement, not just staying put and defending yourself.
Exactly. It shifts the core question from how can I avoid looking bad to what's the absolute best way to achieve this goal?
And this isn't just some, abstract philosophy or a clever metaphor he came up with. There's a deep practical understanding of human psychology under all this. Our natural tendencies, those mental shortcuts, our emotional reactions, they often get in the way of this kind of pure objectivity.
Oh, definitely. Daniel Kahneman's work, in Thinking Fast and Slow is packed with examples. He highlights cognitive biases that just plague us, like overconfidence in clinical decision-making.
Where even experts think they're more accurate than the actual data shows.
Right. Or the hot-cold empathy gap. That's a fascinating one. It's where we tend to underestimate how our current emotional state, whether we're calm and rational, cold or fired up and impulsive, hot, affects what we wanted in the past or what we'll want in the future.
So we make decisions when we're hot that our cold self wouldn't agree with, or we misjudge our past actions.
Exactly. We make decisions we might regret later, or we just misunderstand why we acted a certain way. We are fundamentally kind of built to be irrational sometimes.
These biases are just baked in then.
Pretty much. They're deeply ingrained. So radical transparency, in a way, is like a systemic, rigorous attempt to counteract these built-in human flaws. It works by forcing thought processes out into the open and challenging assumptions.
It's like building an organizational environment that functions as an anti-bias machine.
That's a great way to put it. Think about the insight from how will you measure your life? It points out that companies often jump into new opportunities without asking the really critical question up front. What has to prove true for this to actually work?
Instead, they just dive in, maybe based on enthusiasm or existing biases.
And they unintentionally stack the deck for failure right from the start. Radical transparency, though, it demands that kind of tough, upfront questioning. Get the assumptions out in the open, test them, debate them.
Instead of letting them just sit there, unexamined, potentially leading to disaster.
Right. It's a proactive defense against the pitfalls our own minds tend to create for us.
Okay, so if the goal is stripping away individual biases and really chasing the truth, how do you combine all these different objective viewpoints without it just becoming, well, a mess, a shouting match?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
This rigorous challenging of assumptions, it seems like it actually requires a deliberate embrace of, well, unfiltered conflict and debate. That sounds so counterintuitive to how many teams operate.
It does. But for really high-performing teams, open disagreement isn't seen as a problem to be smoothed over or avoided. It's a vital, productive feature.
So conflict is good.
Healthy conflict around ideas is good. Patrick Lencioni, in his book The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, actually identifies engaging in unfiltered conflict around ideas as a critical trait of cohesive top teams.
Which lines up perfectly with Dalio's view. Conflict as a truth-finding tool.
Exactly. Lencioni stresses that team members actually need to coach one another, not to retreat from healthy debate. Don't back down just because it feels uncomfortable.
And he also says, acknowledging that discomfort, just saying out loud, wow, this is tough, but we need to push through it, that can actually help.
Yeah, he says it's a remarkably effective tool for draining tension. It gives people the confidence to keep going with the difficult but necessary discussion without letting it get personal or spiral out of control. It's about realizing that great decisions often come out of that intense hashing out process.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. It's not just about allowing conflict, but actively, intentionally creating an environment where conflict is seen as productive, not personal.
It's a cultural choice. It's about setting norms.
This makes me think of Amazon. Their culture, especially under Jeff Bezos, was famously confrontational.
Oh, yeah. The Everything Store describes Amazon's internal vibe as notoriously confrontational. Bezos himself apparently believed that truth springs forth when ideas and perspectives are banged against each other, sometimes violently.
Violently, that's a strong word.
Oh.
For a lot of us listening, that sounds less like productive debate and more like, well, a toxic workplace.
It's a fair point. How do Dalio, or Bezos for that matter, ensure these intense clashes don't just become personal attacks or simply shut down people who aren't comfortable with that level of aggression?
Right. What's the safeguard?
Well, the key, proponents would argue, is that the violence is directed at the ideas, not the individuals. And critically, it has to serve a clear, shared goal, finding the absolute best path forward for the organization.
Can you give an example of that?
There's a specific story from Amazon about an internal fight over selling personal lubricants via email. The sales team probably saw the immediate dollars, the revenue potential.
Sure, makes sense.
But Bezos was reportedly willing to slay a profitable aspect of his business rather than test Amazon's bond with its customers. He felt it would damage trust.
So short-term profit versus long-term customer trust.
Exactly. And this wasn't some minor decision made on a whim. It came out of intense, unfiltered debate where the idea of quick profit was thoroughly banged against, as the book says, the long-term value of customer loyalty. It shows the purpose of the conflict is crucial, and it has to tie back to a clear, shared objective or principle.
That's a really important distinction, the intent behind the conflict. And to really grasp the value of this kind of open, maybe even aggressive debate, it helps to look at the alternative, the dangers when dissent is just squashed.
Absolutely. And we have some stark contrasts in the sources. Michael Lewis's Liar's Poker, for example, it paints this picture of a Wall Street trading floor back in the 80s as a minefield of large men on short fuses just waiting to explode.
Doesn't sound like a place for thoughtful disagreement.
Not at all. He tells a story about a trainee who was so petrified, his word, to even step off the elevator onto that floor that he eventually just vanished from the training program altogether.
Wow.
That kind of environment, thick with fear, it's the polar opposite of the psychological safety you need for open debate. Nobody would dare voice a truly different opinion there, let alone challenge someone senior.
Which really brings up that question you raised earlier. Where's the line between unfiltered conflict and just a hostile, abusive environment?
It's a critical line, and that contrast makes it clear. The purpose of the conflict and the underlying trust are absolutely key. Without those, it's just damaging.
Is there another example of suppressed dissent?
Yeah, a really powerful one comes from Robert Caro's huge work, The Power Broker. It details how Robert Moses operated his secretive plans, his total lack of open discussion about developing parks in New York.
He just did what he wanted.
Pretty much. He deliberately avoided public input, shut down internal debate, and Caro argues this led directly to the destruction of the natural values of a park in ways that were not a remediable mistake, irreversible damage.
Even powerful people couldn't sway him.
Disagreements, even from someone like Mayor LaGuardia. There's a famous story of him scrawling "lousy" on a memo about Moses's demands. They were just suppressed or ignored, not debated openly and constructively.
So these examples really hammer home how the absence of transparency and open conflict can lead to terrible, irreversible mistakes. because the necessary challenges, the critical feedback on bad ideas, they just never get voiced or heard seriously.
Exactly. The real cost of not being transparent isn't just that problems stay hidden, it's that reality itself starts to erode within the organization. You end up with this collective delusion that eventually just collapses.
Okay, so it's not just about letting people argue, it's about channeling that energy constructively, building it on respect, and having a clear shared goal. That makes me wonder, how do companies actually do this? What are the real practical mechanisms for radical transparency beyond just, changing your mindset?
Right, the nuts and bolts. Well, one of Dalio's key practical solutions from principles is something he calls believability-weighted decision-making.
Believability weighted. What does that mean?
It means if you can't resolve disagreements just through discussion and logic, and often you can't, especially with complex stuff, the person ultimately responsible for the decision should take a believability-weighted vote.
Yeah.
This means consciously giving more weight to the opinions of people who have relevant experience and, crucially, a proven track record of success in that specific area. It's not about who's loudest or highest ranking or even the majority.
Ah, I see. So it's a meritocracy of ideas based on demonstrated competence in that domain.
Precisely. It democratizes the input, everyone gets a say, but it profoundly respects genuine expertise.
That's really interesting. Adam Grant talks about this too, right, in his book Originals.
Yeah, he expands on this idea of believability. He explains it takes into account objective things like test results, performance reviews, other assessments, but also, and this is key, the judgments of other believable people.
So believable people recognize other believable people. It's like a network of validated expertise.
Kind of. It suggests you earn the right for your opinion to carry more weight by consistently showing good judgment and competence, not just through charisma or your job title. This whole mechanism systematically fights groupthink.
And it empowers, maybe, a junior person with deep data expertise over a senior person relying just on intuition in that specific case.
Potentially, yes. If their track record in that specific area is stronger, it also quantifies intellectual humility in a way. It forces everyone to acknowledge who is most likely to be right about this issue, not just who has the authority.
How would you even implement that? Sounds like you'd need systems to track performance and judgment pretty closely.
You would. Maybe assigning believability scores based on success rates in different domains. It actively encourages people to become believable through solid, objective performance, reinforcing the whole system's focus on truth and getting the best outcomes. The question becomes, who's most likely right about this? Not who's the boss.
Okay, so weighting opinions by believability is one mechanism. What else? You mentioned Adam Grant again.
Right. Grant also makes the point that beyond debate, humanity has developed an even more powerful tool for resolving disagreements. Science. In management. Yeah, he advocates for evidence-based management, where leaders actually design experiments and gather data instead of relying solely on logic, experience, intuition, and conversation. It's about taking a truly scientific, almost clinical approach to business decisions. Let the data decide.
That sounds like the lean startup methodology.
Exactly. The Lean Startup by Eric Ries is a perfect example. It's all about split tests, A/B experiments. You don't just launch something and hope. You constantly measure our product's performance with a brand new set of customers.
And get that brand new report card on how we were doing the very next day.
Right. It creates objective, undeniable feedback, which is gold when you're trying to settle internal disagreements. The data becomes the impartial judge, the reality check for everyone's assumptions or confidence.
The challenge there, I guess, is setting up the experiments correctly and interpreting the results without bias and getting people to actually accept the data, especially if it contradicts their gut feeling.
Huge challenges. It requires real discipline and a culture that genuinely embraces experimentation and, crucially, embraces being proven wrong by the data, not just paying lip service to it.
So think about a recent decision you made. How much was based on what you felt was right versus what the data actually showed? Were there barriers making it hard to truly embrace that data transparently? What might Dalio suggest you put in place?
That's the kind of rigorous thinking it demands, moving from, I think this will work, to the data shows this is working, or just as importantly, the data shows this isn't working.
And having the data isn't enough, right? It has to be communicated clearly, understood, acted upon. Which brings us to, well, explicit communication and feedback systems. They seem foundational.
Absolutely critical. Things like performance reviews, often dreaded, are highlighted in the Harvard Business Review 20-Minute Manager series as a structured chance to help your employees improve. even though giving constructive feedback is hard.
Making feedback a regular, expected thing, not some scary one-off event.
Exactly. It institutionalizes a degree of transparency, helps people understand their performance, where they need to develop, how their work fits into the bigger picture. It creates a predictable rhythm for truth-telling.
And it's not just feedback on the past, but clarity about the future, too. Stephen Covey in The 7 Habits, he really stresses that point about expectations.
Yeah, he says, the subordinate who passively assumes that he or she knows what the boss expects is in for trouble. That passivity, that lack of explicit clarity, it's like a hidden transparency killer.
It creates those unspoken gaps where misunderstandings just fester.
Precisely. So explicitly communicating and clarifying expectations is fundamental. Setting the parameters clearly, leaving no room for ambiguity. Peter Drucker hits this hard too, especially for knowledge workers.
What does Drucker say?
In What Makes an Effective Executive, he says knowledge workers should proactively explain what they are trying to do, why they're trying to do it, how they are going to do it, and what results to expect.
So taking responsibility for making sure you are understood, up and down the chain.
Exactly. It's proactive transparency. It cuts down assumptions, reduces misalignment, prevents problems before they even start by making everything clear to everyone involved.
Okay, so we've laid out the ideal. Objectivity, healthy conflict, clear mechanisms. But humans are involved. We're
Yeah.
messy. There's this whole human element to navigate.
Always the tricky part.
Covey reminds us, right? We see the world not as it is, but as we are, or as we are conditioned to see it. That fundamental human lens means that even if you're being totally transparent, people can interpret things wildly differently. And that causes friction.
That is such a critical point. And it's where many attempts at radical transparency stumble. Our own paradigms, our conditioning, they filter everything. Even clearly presented information gets perceived differently based on someone's background, their mood, their personal history.
Do we have an example of that?
Kim Scott, in Radical Candor, tells this really powerful story. She made what she thought was an entirely reasonable change to improve team understanding. Seemed obvious and transparent to her.
Right.
But 3 of her direct reports complained she was being too autocratic. They felt sad and bad and left out. Some even left her team because of it.
Wow. So what felt like transparency to her landed completely differently for them.
Exactly. It shows that transparency isn't just what you say. It's how it's heard, how it's processed through those individual filters and emotional states. The truth wasn't enough by itself. It needed careful delivery and, crucially, a context of trust.
So it's not just what you say, but how it lands in that emotional context. That really complicates the simple idea of just be honest, doesn't it? It suggests that without some deeper foundation, radical honesty can just become, well, radical abrasion. People getting hurt.
Which is why psychological safety becomes non-negotiable. It's the absolute prerequisite.
Feeling safe to speak up without fear of being punished or humiliated.
Right. Lencioni, again, talks about draining tension from a productive but difficult interchange so people have the confidence to continue. That confidence comes from feeling safe. Without it, people just clam up. They hold back their real thoughts, their discomfort, which totally defeats the purpose of transparency.
And Drucker has that great line about manners.
Oh, yeah. In Managing Oneself, he says, manners. Simple things like saying please and thank you and knowing a person's name or asking after her family, enable 2 people to work together whether they like each other or not. He calls manners the lubricating oil of an organization.
The lubricating oil. I like that.
Without that lubricating oil, radical transparency can just feel harsh, grating, unproductive. It can lead to situations like that anecdote about Elon Musk and his brother Kimball having nasty scraps over a business decision.
Where Elon apparently ripped some skin off his fist.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that was unfiltered, but it doesn't sound like productive conflict that builds trust or gets the best outcome. It sounds more like hostility, a failure of psychological safety and basic respect.
That's a huge distinction.
Yeah.
Manners is lubrication versus, well, fistfights. So true radical transparency needs that climate of mutual respect, not just a green light, to be brutally honest.
Definitely. And part of that respect involves building a united front and having a shared purpose, even when you just have a fierce debate. So the team can actually execute effectively once a decision is made.
That sounds like the military mindset almost.
It connects directly to extreme ownership, the Navy SEAL leadership philosophy. They emphasize that leadership must always present a united front to the troops. Yes, have intense debate, disagreements behind closed doors, that's expected, encouraged.
But once the decision is made,
Then leaders must execute the plan as if it were your own. And this isn't about just blindly obeying. It means you have a responsibility, if you don't understand why a certain path was chosen, to ask those questions up the chain.
Get clarity for yourself.
Right. And then critically, you have to pass that understanding down to your team. Make sure they get the rationale too, so they can execute with real conviction, not just because they were told to. It fosters alignment through informed transparency.
That's powerful. It's about building shared understanding and buy-in, even if it wasn't your preferred option initially. It puts the responsibility for understanding on everyone, not just the bosses.
Exactly. And this link to a shared unifying purpose is what makes the transparency work, rather than just divide people. Blue Ocean strategy talks about this too, the need to mobilize people's minds and hearts for the new strategy by building a culture of trust, commitment, and voluntary cooperation.
So transparency without purpose and trust isn't enough. It might even be harmful.
Right. It has to serve a bigger goal that everyone buys into. Otherwise, it risks breaking the very team it's supposed to be improving. When people get the why behind the what and they trust the process is fair and aimed at collective success, then radical transparency can really take root and become this powerful engine. It connects back to that idea of a core ideology, from built to last, the organization's enduring character. Transparency helps keep actions aligned with that compass even when the waters get rough.
Which brings us neatly to the ultimate payoff, right? Fostering that high-performance culture. And maybe just as vital, actively avoiding those terrible traps of deception we talked about.
Because ultimately, the relentless pursuit of radical transparency is about learning faster, improving faster, getting smarter as an organization.
Yeah, accelerating that learning cycle.
Absolutely. The lean startup, again, it shows this so clearly with its continuous development and testing using real numbers. That constant feedback loop is core to Dalio's vision.
Measuring performance, getting those daily report cards.
Allows organizations to rapidly optimize, to learn what really works and what doesn't. That objective feedback is a direct result of transparent, data-driven processes. Without it, learning just stalls. The organization can't adapt quickly enough.
And becomes vulnerable.
Exactly. Vulnerable to competitors, to market shifts, to unforeseen problems. It's about building a dynamic, self-correcting system, not a rigid, static bureaucracy that resists change.
So what this all means for you listening is radical transparency isn't just about being honest because it's nice. It's about being honest for the sake of accelerated learning, for adaptability. It's about building a team or an organization that can evolve fast.
And when that transparency is missing, when reality gets obscured or just ignored, the consequences can be absolutely catastrophic. It can lead to cultures of outright deception.
And for a really stark, frankly chilling contrast, you just have to look at Enron. The smartest guys in the room details it all.
It's terrifying. Their whole internal culture involved pervasive strategies to minimize losses and take liabilities off the balance sheet. Executives consistently dodged responsibility. They were quick to blame others when anything went wrong.
It wasn't just a lack of transparency, it was active, systemic deception. Deliberately hiding reality for short-term gain, for ego.
And the fallout wasn't just financial tricks on paper. Remember Enron's failure to provide timely or accurate bills to its actual customers? For 4 years on one contract.
Yeah, that's insane. How does that even happen?
It shows how a total lack of internal transparency and accountability at the top inevitably poisons everything. It spills over into basic operational failures. It wasn't just cooking the books. It was a fundamental breakdown of business competence, all hidden behind layers of lies and finger-pointing.
Until the whole thing just collapsed spectacularly, destroying the company, hurting so many people.
It really raises that frightening question. How does a simple lack of transparency, maybe not even malicious at first, slide into a culture of outright destructive deception? Enron is the ultimate cautionary tale. It shows that slippery slope when objective reality gets consistently ignored or twisted.
It makes the case that transparency isn't just a nice-to-have or a moral choice. It's fundamental for operational integrity, for good decisions, for long-term survival.
That constant dodging of responsibility, the hiding of financial and operational truths, it created this brittle, fake structure that was just bound to shatter. It's a powerful warning about letting unexamined assumptions and lies fester.
Okay, let's bring it back to the positive side. Managing for the long haul, adapting to change that requires this kind of ongoing, honest recalibration. All right.
Definitely. The idea of managing your boss, that effective managers proactively establish and manage relationships with everyone on whom they depend, including their boss, that requires transparency, clear communication, managing expectations. It's critical for long-term effectiveness.
Building those robust channels for truth to flow up and down.
Exactly. And tying it all together back to built to last, that core ideology, the organization's enduring character that stays consistent over time beyond specific products or market cycles. Radical transparency helps keep the day-to-day actions aligned with that core.
Even as strategies and markets shift.
Right. It ensures that while how you do things might change, the fundamental why, the principles, the purpose remains clear and is genuinely reflected in how the organization operates. It prevents that slow drift away from core values and ensures adaptation is purposeful, guided by principles, not just by fear or delusion. It's maybe the ultimate tool for keeping an organization true to itself while it constantly gets better.
Wow. Okay, so we've really explored Ray Dalio's transformative, definitely challenging concept of radical transparency. We've dug into its roots in overcoming our own subjectivity, cultivating objectivity, its reliance on unfiltered but productive debate.
And the practical mechanisms like believability weighting and using data.
Right. And we didn't ignore the crucial human side, the absolute need for psychological safety, shared purpose, and trust to make any of it actually work.
We saw how it drives learning and improvement.
And, maybe most starkly, how its absence, like with Enron, can lead to absolute disaster, catastrophic failure.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does.
Yep.
So if radical transparency really is the key to getting to the truth faster, to building that truly high-performance culture, here's something to think about. What single uncomfortable truth are you, or maybe your team, currently avoiding?
Could be out of politeness, maybe fear, maybe just because it feels easier to ignore it right now.
Whatever the reason. What would it truly take for you to bring that specific truth out into the light? Even just for one open, honest conversation.
That's a powerful question to leave people with.
That's it for this deep dive. We really hope you walk away with a clear, comprehensive understanding of this powerful, sometimes difficult idea. And maybe, just maybe, a fresh perspective on how you approach honesty and feedback in your own life and your own work.